That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes, a podcast about lawyers using their authentic voices to change the world.
The first thing is that more important than your law degree or your job title or your salary is the relationships that you have as a professional. And over the course of your career, deep quality relationships with really talented people is going to be way more valuable to you than your GPA, where you went to law school, what your first job was, what any of your jobs were. That's what's going to assure your career success. You can always get lucky and get a great job, but having that deep network of quality professional relationships is an insurance policy, it's a career booster, it's an opportunity multiplier, it's all these things. And so relationships are key, and spend the time to develop them. Don't just sit behind your desk doing the work and putting in your hours. Doing great work and putting in your hours will keep you from getting fired. But it won't keep you from getting laid off if your firm blows up or goes under or has trouble, loses a big client, loses, practice area dissolves.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes. I'm your host, Merla Vaughn. Here to BS with me today is Richard Amador, whose story I find fascinating and who will no doubt inspire all of you to embrace your authenticity. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Hey, Merle, great to be here.
Good. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. So what I do is I give people a little idea about your background. So I'm going to do that. I want to start by saying that you went to UCLA undergrad with a BA in poli-sci. Boo! I went to USC. Fight on.
Well, people make mistakes, nobody's holding it against you, Merle.
Okay, that's a good one. Touche. We actually attended UC Berkeley together. We both received our JDs at was then called Bolt Hall, now UC Berkeley School of Law. We were there at the same time, but I don't think we knew each other.
Well, you were popular. I was just a wallflower, so I knew who you were, but you had no idea who I was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well,
it's not like you ignored me. You just didn't know I existed. That's all right.
well, but now look at this. I know you existed. You exist. I've invited you to be on my podcast, so everything's come full circle.
Absolutely. And I got to say, I took a look at some of the interviews that you've done, and even though I wasn't able to listen to all of them, I looked at who you interviewed, and I don't know how I accidentally ended up on this list, but the rest of those folks are pretty darn impressive.
Well, you belong here. Look, I like to talk to folks whom I find interesting, who I think will be inspiring, particularly to lawyers of color, to young lawyers, and also who can give some advice to potential employers, whether it's at companies or law firms, about, how to uh, how to retain young lawyers and particularly lawyers of color. So I thought, based on some of the things that I've seen that you've done, some of your LinkedIn posts, your blog that we'll talk about later, that you'd be the perfect person to talk to.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if people want to listen, but oh boy, do I have a lot to say on those topics.
Great. So, for all of our listeners, Richard is the managing partner of Sanchez and Amador LLP. You've had that firm for 27 years. I believe you have about 14 attorneys, and you specialize in employment and business trials, correct?
Yes. Yes,
And
we also have sorry, we also have a banking practice, which I have nothing to do with. We have some amazing, brilliant transactional lawyers that went to second-rate schools like Stanford and such, and so they do that practice. And then the team that I lead is employment lawyers, and we handle single plaintiff employment litigation as well as sensitive internal investigations.
Got it. And so, and I, you guys can look up Richard on LinkedIn, link in with him. You talk about all of the accolades and things that you've received. Your peer review rated AV by Martindale Hubbell, a fellow and one of the highest ranking. Wait, so you're a fellow in the College of Labor and Employment Lawyers. And so I could go on and on, but I'm not gonna.
Good.
So, but
Good.
but it is impressive. So the one of the things that I wanted to ask is, I'm going to ask you about your background after this, but one of the things I find interesting is that it doesn't look like you ever worked for a big firm. Is that
I
true?
No, I did for exactly 2 years. It's not on my resume. It's not on my bio. I sucked at it, and so I did that for a couple years, and then I worked for a small firm for an amazing trial lawyer who has dozens and dozens of trials under his belt. He's now a LA Superior Court judge, Michael Stern, and I worked with him for a few years before starting the firm. So I was about 4.5 years out before I started the firm. So I got out of school in '88, and we started the firm, I want to say, in early '94, although it might have been '95. I don't know. They all blend together after 30 years.
Wow, and you know what? We did almost exactly the same thing. I went to when I graduated with you in '88 from Berkeley, went with Cooley, a big firm, as a
Hmm.
transactional lawyer, and I lasted about 4 years before I left and became a GC of a small black hair care company. So that we have that in common as well.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's funny. I mentor so many young lawyers who, as junior lawyers, are far, far better lawyers than I ever was as a junior lawyer. And it's interesting, because I've got 25, 30 years on them, or 20 in some cases, I know a lot more. I have a lot more skill, et cetera, and experience. But if you were to compare apples to apples of way back when, me to them now, it's like I couldn't hold a candle to these young folks. And so I just, it's really exciting for me to use the things that I've learned over the years to help them do better than I could ever have dreamed of as a young lawyer.
That's got to be inspiring for a lot of people because I'm a recruiter, and most even in-house, most companies believe that the best trained lawyers come from AmLaw, at least AmLaw 200 firms. And I'm really intrigued by how you were able to become such a good litigator and trial lawyer without having gone through that.
Well, so here's my secret is that I didn't have enough work to fill my plate, so I could spend all the time I needed to learning my craft.
Got
When we
it.
first started the firm, we were there was three of us, and we were all basically what would now be called mid-level associates at other firms, and so we didn't have much in the way of a client base, and so I could spend 15 hours writing a motion that should only take 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, and just making it sing. I could spend time going in and watching trial lawyers try cases and learn from their successes and failures. I've probably read like 20 trial books over the years, some of them multiple times. Attended a ton of CLEs. I went to different things over the country where I could see really like these all day things where you've got trial masters coming in and talking about trials that they've had and tools that they use. So I could spend a lot of time developing my craft. And then one of the other things that's been really key for me is um, continuous improvement, right? So, and I still do this today. If I take a deposition, I handle a negotiation, a mediation, a presentation, whatever it might be, I'm always both asking for feedback as well as giving myself feedback so that I'm constantly striving to get better. Even now, in everything that I do, I'm trying to be better at it, and that's made a huge difference. And just going back for a second to your comment about the training with AmLaw, one of the things that I do best is take depositions, especially plaintiffs and single plaintiff employment depositions. And I teach lawyers all over the country how to do it. And some of my best students are second to fifth and sixth year associates in the quote unquote best law firms in the country. No one's
Mm-hmm.
ever taught them how to take a deposition. They went to a seminar that their firm put on once. Maybe they went to the NITA depot training, but no one's ever really sat down with them and taught them how to take a skillful deposition and deal with a difficult opposing counsel and an evasive witness. And so I teach these lawyers how to take depositions, and in many cases, by their third, fourth deposition, they're doing better than the partners in their law firms, and that's really cool to watch. And that's my goal, is to help young lawyers of color to be the best, because that's the only way they're going to succeed, is they have to be better than everybody else, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But I still want to talk a little bit about, okay, this business you've been in, because everybody knows the practice of law is also a business. At what point did you said you didn't have enough work? At what point did that change? At what point where did you say to yourself, this is gonna work? I'm gonna we're gonna hang in there, and this is actually gonna work, because you've been doing it 27 years. So clearly there's a point at which it clicked.
The best analogy I can come up with is a scary one, and it's probably overly grandiose. But I sort of think of it like the American experiment in democracy. It can always fail, but we have to make it work. And we've just been we refuse to fail. And in the Great Recession, we really did fail as a business. We were broke, and my partner at the time, at that point, it was just one of the two other founding partners and I uh, were going forward with the law firm. The other had gone back to big law, and so our business just froze up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we did not have the wherewithal to withstand that, but we did, by basically not getting paid for many months at a time. And then our employees all agreed to a 10% across the board pay cut, and we just barely survived the Great Recession. But really, as a business, we had failed. And what we were supposed to do, according to the way businesses operate, is we were supposed to lay everybody off because we didn't have enough work for them, so that David Sanchez and I could get paid, or we should shutter, go bankrupt, and start over in some other iteration, or join law firms or law departments or something. But we just refused to fail. And that's been our mindset from day one, is that we are going to make this work, and we have. And now it's we're turning away work, and we've got work coming out of our ears. We work for almost all Fortune 500 companies, and the ones that aren't are really well funded, high growth companies, usually mostly gig economy companies. And so I consider us to be successful now, but we can always fail. We just won't.
I love that. I love that. It's like by any means necessary, right? Never, ever give up.
Just do what you got to do.
Now, so did that come? So now let's talk a little bit about you and where you come from, and your background, and who inspired you growing up. Did that attitude come from? I mean, you're a Latino. I don't know where you're from. I want you to tell me about all of that. But is that where you got that grit, and i- is it associated with your background?
Yeah, I think it is. I definitely get it from my parents. My dad came from a family of farm workers, and as a small child, he was a farm worker. his, the big successes in the family when he was a child were his oldest brothers and sisters who got to work indoors in a cannery. And they were their own network, right? There's, I think, 10 kids, with my father being the youngest and his oldest brother being old enough to be his father. And
Mm-hmm.
they helped each other out to get out of those living conditions and to get their parents out of those living conditions. And so my father, um, he his older brothers and sisters made sure that he went to college. They made sure that he got to go to a job where he got to put leather shoes on and wear a shirt with a collar and a
Right.
tie, when he got out of college. And he served in the National Guard. And my mom, she gave up. My mom is still with us. My father passed away about a dozen years ago, but my mom, she gave up her opportunities when she was young to raise a family, my older sister and I. But then when we were, like the equivalent of middle school age now, she started going to school. She went to community college. She got her AA degree. She went to Cal State Los Angeles. She got her BA degree. Then she got her master's degree, all part-time. I was the typist for my mom's master's thesis. And
Amazing.
one of the proudest moments of my entire life was sitting there at my mother's graduation for her master's degree. I was so enormously proud of my mom. And both my mom and my dad just instilled in me that, you do your best, you constantly learn, you constantly seek to improve, but you do it not for yourself. You succeed so you can serve others. And that's my mom, even though she's well into her 80s now. I won't say exactly how well, but she's well into her 80s, and she is still vibrant. She's still kicking. She's still running things. Every organization in her town, they're asking her to be the president or chair this or chair that, because she takes care of business. And that's where I get it from. And they get it from their parents before them, and I've tried to instill the same thing in my daughters. And my wife is amazing. She's a civil engineer, and has a very successful career of her own.
That is very, very, very inspiring. I'll tell you, a lot of the conversations that I've had with folks, I ask that because you never know where people come from or what their situation is. And I think one of the things that I found interesting is that for the most part, the people, the people of color with whom I've spoken have not really had come from that kind of humble beginning. And I was starting to wonder if, it's, it's just really interesting to me to talk to folks who have transcended um the odds, and it sounds like you really did. And so and your parents really did. um what stereotypes do you feel like you've had to transcend, throughout your personal life and your career? And have they been, wrong, or have they been right?
Oh gosh, I don't know that we have enough time for all of that, but I can tell you that I see this all the time. And let me go back a step. Uh, my parent education was critically important to my parents, and so they made sure that I got into a Jesuit high school, which is a it's a top notch high school. And they had this sort of informal affirmative action program where, and I looked in the yearbooks for about 6 or 7 years, and it's this my theory held true, which was they had an informal affirmative action program where 10% of every class was Black, 10% of every class was Latino, 5% of every class was other, and the rest of it was white.
Mhm.
And the white kids, they were wealthy. I mean, their fathers, CEOs and executives, and entrepreneurs, real estate moguls, etc. And oh my God, the racist things that came out of their mouth. I was called a wetback, a beaner, a spick on a daily basis at school.
Oh, wow.
This is in high
By the
school, and
kids, by
by the
kids.
kids, by the kids. Well, and the school tolerated it, right? What
Right,
you got for that was a finger wagging. That was it.
right.
Is you got to if you called another kid a racist slur, you got a finger wagging, and nothing else. Not even a suspension, not a detention, nothing. I mean, you're in the parking lot during the break and you got a detention, but you call somebody a racist slur and you get a finger wag.
Right.
Um, and so these same young men grew up to be CEOs and entrepreneurs and real estate moguls and lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned a really valuable lesson in high school. And that is that as we get older, we put filters on and we learn to modulate how we speak. And so these same young men who called me all these racist terms, and my friends, I was an athlete, not a very good one, but I was an athlete, and so I hung out with the kids on the football team, with the black players on the football team, and the black players on the basketball team, and Latino kids that were also athletes, like on the track team and the cross country team, and so we all hung out together, and we all got called these things.
Mm-hmm.
And but what I learned is that as adults, people um, they put on their public face, and they learn to put on their public face. They learn to put on filters. And so then when I was at UCLA, I saw some of the same stuff, but less of it, and usually only when they were drunk. There are racists out there. There are people who harbor these sentiments that if you don't look like them, you are other and you are less than.
Mm-hmm.
But they learn to say the right things, to be PC. And and as a practicing lawyer, I've seen that too. Uh, and and I've heard about. I have friends. I mean, I can pass, right? I'm sure you've heard the term. This person can pass, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
look
Mm-hmm.
you look pretty white, so if people don't know anything, they might just assume, right? Well, my name is a little weird, and
It could be from
and
Spain or something
so I
like
could
that,
be from
though.
Spain
Yeah.
or whatever, right? And so it could be if you don't speak any Spanish at all, you might not even recognize where it's from. It just sounds different somehow. And so I hear things, and then I have friends who completely pass. Plus, they have really basic Anglo white last names, and the things that they share with me are appalling. And so I've seen a lot over the years. And then being at a small minority owned law firm, one of the things that we struggled with for the longest time and still deal with on a rare occasion is just the assumption that because we're a small minority owned law firm, we do small stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
we can't handle difficult things. Our banking lawyers handle, transactions worth tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. They do really sophisticated stuff for some of the largest banks in the world. And our employment litigation team, we do single plaintiff work as opposed to class action work because we think it's fun. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating work to do. One of the things that we use to recruit lawyers from large law firms who are employment lawyers is you don't have to do class action work. And so you
Right.
could say, okay, well, we don't do the big class action work, and that's true. But we have clients where we are their go-to California lawyers. They can use anybody they want to, and oftentimes we take over cases from large law firms, some of the best preeminent law firms in the country by reputation, where the client becomes dissatisfied and they call us and they say, we'd like you to take this case over. It's 45 days from trial, or it's 90 days from trial. We had a mediation. Our counsel told us they were sure it was going to settle. There's a multi-million-dollar demand. Richard, we'd like your team to take this case over now. And so we do really tough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, if people don't know us, and this certainly was the case for the first, 15, 20 years of our existence, is people assume we only do little stuff. And so I'd get these referrals for essentially, small claims, right? $10,000 in dispute, $5,000 in dispute.
Right.
And it's like, no, we don't do that. Sorry.
And
And
that
so,
is that is a
yes,
stereotype. Yeah, that is a stereotype because
absolutely.
because you're Latino, or because your firm is Sanchez and Amador, that you must be doing the small potatoes work and for small fees, right? Your billing rate is really low.
Yes, yes, and that's interesting as well, because there's a weird dynamic going on in the employment space right now, because you have these huge employment boutiques that are in a race to the bottom on rates,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the full service law firms with their really high rates, and so that's kind of our sweet spot, is clients that want the sophisticated work that high hourly rate commands, but they don't want to pay it, and they would love to pay the bargain basement rates, but they realize that what they're getting for that is not the quality that they're looking for. And so that's our sweet spot, and that's where we get our referrals. That's where, once we get our foot in the door with the client and we can show them what we can do, then they end up sending us their whole portfolio of California employment work.
And how do you feel about the what's going on right now? As you know, I focus on diversity recruiting.
Mhm.
And there's a lot in the news these days about companies and firms that are wanting to do better on diversity. Do you get a lot of contact from either firms that want to refer stuff to you, or companies that want to bring you on because you're a diverse firm?
I wouldn't say a lot. We get some. Um, Usually, those conversations are that, if the diversity is what's driving it, then it's usually not work that we want. It's
Mm-hmm.
because then it's okay. We want you to do work for us on the cheap, and we want
Mm-hmm.
you to do our simplest, lowest work because you're a diverse firm.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the clients that we have the best relationships with, they tend to look at it as, we need somebody really good. And the fact that you help us with our diversity goals, oh my God, that's such a bonus, right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's the distinction to me, is what's driving it. And if the client is just looking to add diversity, usually what happens is we end up on a list. And we might get an occasional bone thrown to us, and I don't want to be on anybody's list, and I don't want anybody's leftover scraps. I'm too proud for that. My mother raised me to be too proud for that, and so we don't want anybody's table scraps. And one of the mottos that I have with my team here is, if it was easy, anybody could do it. And usually I'll fill in the blank with some very well known law firms uh, that I won't mention here, but the we want the tough stuff. We want the challenging stuff. And yes, it makes us gnash our teeth and struggle with, okay, how are we gonna deal with this one? But we always find a way.
It's funny, and I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and I love this. You have these little asterisks on your LinkedIn, like, don't about who you won't talk to, who you won't do this with. And I love the one that says, "Note to all legal recruiters engaged by large and mid-sized firms, that would be a perfect platform for me and my team of amazing lawyers in our strong Fortune 500 client relationships. Don't bother. We have the perfect platform."
Yeah, I get
How
these
do you
cold
really feel,
calls.
Richard?
Yeah, I get these cold calls and these emails all the time. And it's like, yeah, no, I got people I mentor in your law firm and not interested. And so, yeah, it's a little sandbox, but it's our sandbox, and we get to do things the way we want to do them, with people that we respect and enjoy working with, both within the team and in our client relationships. We've gotten to the point now where we can be picky about who our clients are. And if a client is going to be difficult to work with, we don't need the work. And
Yep.
and so we're really fortunate that we get to pick who we work with, both as teammates and as clients. And that's a beautiful place to be. My people, everybody on the team, they're constantly being bombarded by recruiters, both internal recruiters at law firms, as well as retained recruiters like yourself. And they could every single one of us could make a ton of more money someplace else, but we wouldn't be practicing law the way we practice law. And so for us, that's worth some money.
Well, good for you. I appreciate that. Although I know that wasn't meant for me, but
Oh, absolutely not. But I'll just flat out say, don't be calling my people, Merle, because I'll take that personally.
we'd have to we'd have to go to blows probably. Um, So you also say that you're passionate about mentoring young lawyers of color in career success, developing business, making partner in big law, and starting and growing their own law firms. I mean, that is definitely commendable. So this is an opportunity for you to kind of speak to those folks. What advice just kind of generally do you have or do you give?
Oh gosh, I mean that's why I did the blog, because there's just so much, right? But let me try and come up with the top three. The first thing is that more important than your law degree or your job title or your salary is the relationships that you have as a professional. And over the course of your career, deep quality relationships with really talented people
Yep.
is going to be way more valuable to you than your GPA, where you went to law school, what your first job was, what any of your jobs were. That's what's going to assure your career success. You can always get lucky and get a great job, but having that deep network of quality professional relationships is an insurance policy, it's a career booster, it's an opportunity multiplier, it's all these things. And so relationships are key, and spend the time to develop them. Don't just sit behind your desk doing the work and putting in your hours. Doing great work and putting in your hours will keep you from getting fired, but it won't keep you from getting laid off if your firm blows up or goes under or has trouble, loses a big client, loses, practice area dissolves. So that professional network will save you in all those circumstances. So that would be number one. Number two would be have adult conversations. And this is something I have to come up with a better word for it. Maybe you can help me out here, Merle. But what I've taken to calling having adult conversations. And this is something that's taken me many years post adulthood to figure out for myself. But so much of the time we have a story in our head about what's going on and about what people care about or don't care about and how they are treating us and what they mean when they said this, that, or the other thing. But we don't actually talk to them about it. We just get all emotional. We get angry or hurt or bitter or resentful or sullen or whatever it is, but we don't have an adult conversation. And oftentimes, if you just have an adult conversation with your employer, whatever it is that you thought was a barrier is not a barrier. The opportunity that you didn't get, maybe you didn't get it for a very specific reason that's actually good for you. Maybe the opportunity that you want, they didn't realize that you wanted, or they forgot that you wanted, and you remind them, and boom, it's yours. And so it's really, really important for all of us, but especially young lawyers of color, to have adult conversations. And if the response is, well, we don't really care what you think, get out and close the door behind you, then fine, get out and close the door behind you, go someplace else where they're going to appreciate your skills and what you bring to the table.
Well, I think, and that's a good segue into authenticity and remaining true to yourself, right? Because I think that especially for uh, folks of color, lawyers of color, that's hard to do because we are always code switching and we're always, a lot of people, like you said, there are people, particularly people of Hispanic descent who can pass, if they choose to. There are LGBTQ folks who can pass if they choose to. Black folks can't do that. Most of us, some of us can,
Yeah, a very
but
small number can, but
very
for the
few
most part,
can.
yeah.
But I think that because of just, historic, how people have been treated historically and just kind of systemic bias, a lot of people are just afraid to be authentic, to speak up, to ask too many questions because they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. I've like never been that way. I've always been outspoken and very candid, which hasn't always worked in my favor. But I can look at myself in the face. I mean, look myself in the mirror every day and feel good about it. I mean, what would you say to young people who are worried about being their authentic selves?
Well, first off, I think it's important to understand what being your authentic self really means. Um, because I think you should be true to your values, right? You should be
Mhm.
true to your beliefs, and that's not something worth compromising. And whether they're your religious beliefs, your cultural beliefs, your ethical beliefs, you should be true to those, and that simply is not worth compromising. And unless you absolutely have to like feed your family. And even then, I think that's a close call.
Right.
And certainly it's a call that that's an easy call for me to make, that, I'll make do somehow. But for other people, that can be a tougher call to make. And I respect that. But then there's the bringing my authentic self to work movement, which has to do more with, okay, well, I want to be the same way I am when I'm with my friends. Well, you know what? Nah, I'm not buying that one, because if you think about who you are when you're with your grandma, that's not the same person you are when you're with your friends. And who you are with your best buddy that you grew up with versus who you are with the person you're on your third date with. Um, they're all you. You're not lying, hopefully. But they're different versions of your authentic self. And so you can bring your authentic self to work without being everything you are with your friend group. And that's just part of being an adult, I think. Uh, Very different though from having to hide your beliefs and your culture, and things like that.
I agree. 100%. You talked earlier or alluded earlier to your blog, which is called The Color of Law, which I saw on LinkedIn as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who gets it? How do you get it if you'd like to get it? And how did it start?
Well, I think we're up to like 12 subscribers now. Um, and so you'd think I would know all 12 names, but I don't. So here's how I have one of my dear friends is an amazingly talented lawyer by the name of Juan Her, and he's in house, and he and I, we maybe talk once every year or two, but every time it's just one of those deep, meaningful conversations. And I consider him to be a dear friend. And even though he's many years my junior, I consider him to be a mentor of mine. Although he'd probably argue with that vociferously because he's one of the humblest people I've ever met in my life. And he was the one that really pushed me to write. He actually was trying to get me to write a book, and finally, to stave him off, I agreed to do a blog. And the focus of it is, less passing along the things that I pass along to the lawyers I mentor. I mentor dozens and dozens and dozens of lawyers all over the country. Some of them, it's a phone call once every year or two. Some of
Mhm.
them it's a monthly check-in. Some of them it's an as needed. So it might be 5 phone calls in a month, and then nothing for 6 months. It just kind of is all over the map in terms of frequency. But that's allowed me both to get better at helping to uh, guide them and assist them in dealing with challenges, as well as giving me a great perspective because I'm hearing from them in all these different iterations. Some of them are junior associates, some of them are senior associates, some of them are junior partners, some of them are in-house new, some of them are in-house in a managing role. Some of them are second-year lawyers, some of them are 15-year lawyers. And in all different iterations, Fortune 500s, startups, stealth mode startups, AmLaw 50 companies, little boutique law firms in small population states, kind of all over the map. And it's really given me a great perspective. And so I hear common questions, I hear common struggles, I see common issues, misperceptions, and so I try to address those in the blog, basically to magnify the message that I give when I'm talking to young lawyers of color about their career issues and challenges.
Nice, nice. And I know that you uh, like to mentor young lawyers of color. And are you really involved? Are you involved in HNBA? Are you, what are you doing for, to stay involved in your community?
That's a great question, and I don't know, I'm embarrassed is the right word, chagrined to tell you that I really am not as involved as I would like to be in the community of Latino attorneys, either locally or nationally. I used to be, um, but I have a limited amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I firmly believe is that all of us, whether we are Asian American, Latino, Black, that we're stronger if we help each other
Yep.
and not just focus on ourselves. Um, and so the majority of the lawyers that I mentor are actually Black and Asian. Um,
Interesting.
and and I seek out Latino attorneys, and because there's so few of them. Outside of Florida, with the vibrant, very successful Cuban American legal community, there's just not a lot of Latino business attorneys in the country anywhere, even here in Los Angeles.
Right.
And I was involved in a lot of different organizations when I was younger. I've been on the boards of, a long list of different legal diversity organizations and task forces with the ABA and et cetera. But um, the 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 one where I'm deeply involved now because it's so focused is the National Employment Law Council. So the National Employment Law Council, it's attorneys of color practicing management side labor and employment law. And
Hmm.
so that's what I do. That's where those are the people I'm in the best position to help. And we have an amazing program called the Academy, the NALC Academy for junior labor and employment lawyers of color. And so, because I feel like for the time that I have, that's where I can maximize the impact. That's where I spend it.
Richard, this has been awesome. I am so glad that we had this time together. Thank you so much for being here to BS with me today. And thanks to everyone for listening. Until the next episode, remember that everybody is different and different is good.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
We hope you enjoyed the stories shared in today's episode of BS, Beyond Stereotypes. Join us next time when another authentic personality unleashes their uniqueness on the world.